The key feels alien in my hand. Cold, sharp, and wrong. It's a copy of a copy. The metal still smelling faintly of the hardware store, a scent of fresh-cut steel and possibility. It slides into the lock of apartment 7B with a slick, oiled silence that feels like a betrayal all on its own. I can hear it from here, a high-pitched happy yapping. A sound I've dreamed of for years. The sound of a life I was supposed to be building. My life. My dream.
My dog.
Inside that door with my husband and a woman who is not me. My hand trembles, not from fear, but from a cold, quiet rage that has been my only companion for the last 37 days. The papers in my other hand rustle, a crisp, legal sound that cuts through the muffled noise of the city outside. Each sheet is a nail. Each paragraph a hammer. I am here to build a coffin for the life I thought I had, and I will use the tools he gave me to do it. I take a breath, the air in the hallway stale with the scent of old carpet and other people's cooking. Then I turn the key. If you've ever stood on a threshold, knowing that the second you cross it, nothing will ever be the same again, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. The world feels strangely quiet in those moments, doesn't it? And if you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps me share these stories and reminds me I'm not the only one who has ever had to turn that key. Just 6 months ago, my world was built on concrete and steel, blueprints and dreams. I'm an architect. I don't just design buildings. I build futures. Stability, structure, a solid foundation. These aren't just professional terms for me, they're a personal creed. My life with Mark was supposed to be my masterpiece. A 10-year project, meticulously planned. We met in college, a whirlwind of late-night study sessions and cheap coffee. He was the artist, the free-spirited graphic designer who saw the world in colors and curves, while I saw it in angles and load-bearing walls. He was the poetry to my prose, and for a long time it worked. He made me feel like I could unbend, like not everything had to be calculated to the last decimal point. And I, in turn, gave him a sense of grounding, a structure to contain his beautiful, chaotic energy. Our shared dream was a house. Not just any house. A small, forgotten Victorian on the edge of town, one we'd drive by on Sundays. It was dilapidated, with a sagging porch and peeling paint, but I could see its bones. I had the blueprints already drafted, saved in a folder on my desktop labeled someday. I'd spent hundreds of hours on them, refining the layout, planning the light, imagining where we'd put the couch, the dining table, the dog bed. That was the other part of the dream, a dog. A clumsy, happy golden retriever who would fill the restored hallways with the sound of his paws and his silly, joyful barks. Mark would name him Sunny. He decided that years ago. But dreams, especially ones with sagging porches, cost money. Mark's freelance work was a fickle stream, a flood 1 month, a drought the next. He was brilliant but not ambitious in a way that translated to a steady income. I was the bedrock. For the last 2 years, I'd been pouring every ounce of my being into a project at my firm, a massive commercial development that was my ticket to a senior partnership and, more importantly, a colossal annual bonus. The someday fund. The down payment for the house. The key to unlocking our future. My life became a blur of deadlines and caffeine. I'd leave the apartment before Mark was awake, the scent of his coffee still lingering in the air, a phantom of the morning we didn't share. I'd come home long after he'd gone to sleep, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling of our dark bedroom. Sometimes I'd find a plate of food left in the microwave for me, a little note stuck to it. You're a rock star. Love. Those notes were my fuel. They were the reassurance that my sacrifice was for us. He was my biggest cheerleader. He'd rub my shoulders when I was hunched over my laptop at 2 in the morning, whispering words of encouragement, telling me how proud he was, how it would all be worth it. He'd listen for hours as I talked about structural integrity and zoning permits, his eyes full of what I thought was adoration. He was my partner, my soft place to land in a world of hard edges. He understood the dream. He wanted it just as much as I did. Or so I believed. He was so good at making me believe. The day the bonus was confirmed, The world snapped into sharp, brilliant focus. The number in the email was staggering, more than I'd even dared to hope for. It was enough. It was more than enough. I felt a lightness in my chest, the weight of 2 years of relentless pressure dissolving in an instant. I called Mark, my voice shaking with a joy so pure it felt like a physical force. He shouted into the phone, his excitement a perfect echo of my own. "We did it, Clara. You did it. We're getting our house." That night, he took me out to celebrate. We went to a fancy restaurant we could never afford, the kind with white tablecloths and tiny, exquisite portions. He ordered champagne and raised his glass. "To my brilliant, beautiful wife," he said, his eyes sparkling in the candlelight. The architect of our future, he'd never seemed more handsome, more in love. We talked for hours, not about work or stress, but about the house. About paint colors and garden plans. About Sunny. We walked home holding hands, the city air crisp and full of promise. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt like I could breathe. I felt like we had finally, truly arrived. I fell asleep that night tangled up in his arms, convinced that I was the luckiest woman in the world. I had my brilliant husband, and I had our future, sitting right there in our joint savings account, waiting for us. The foundation was set. The structure was sound. I was sure of it. I had never been more wrong. The morning after our celebration, the world was still painted in hues of champagne and victory. I woke up to the smell of coffee, but this time, Mark was there to hand me a cup. He was buzzing with energy, pacing the small kitchen of our apartment. "I've been thinking," he said, his eyes alight with an idea. "About the money." I smiled, sipping the coffee. "I know. I was up half the night looking at listings. The Victorian is still on the market, Mark. It's like it was waiting for us." He stopped pacing and took my hands. His were warm, but there was a tremor of something in them, an electric current of excitement that felt slightly off-key. "The house is a sure thing, babe. But what if we could do more? What if we could make that money work for us before we even put in the offer?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "A friend of mine, Tom, he's in finance. He's got this incredible, can't-miss investment opportunity.
Otan startup.
It's ground floor, but it's about to explode. He said if we get in now, we could double the bonus in 6 months. Maybe less." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. I'm a planner, an architect. I believe in tangible assets, in brick and mortar, not in the volatile whims of the stock market. "Mark, that sounds risky. This isn't play money. This is our house. Our entire future." "It's not risky, it's smart," he insisted, his grip on my hands tightening. "Tom is a genius. This is a guaranteed thing. Think about it, Clara.
We could buy the house outright. No mortgage.
We could do all the renovations at once, top of the line. We wouldn't have to cut any corners." He was painting a beautiful picture, using all the right colors, all the right words. He knew how to sell a dream. But I was hesitant. "I don't know, Mark. Can we talk to this, Tom? I'd want to see the prospectus, the data." "There's no time," he cut in, his voice urgent. "The window is closing today. It's now or never. We have to be decisive." He pulled me close, his voice dropping to a low, persuasive murmur against my ear. "Clara, you've been the one working so hard, carrying us. Let me do this. Let me take your incredible gift and multiply it. Trust me. Trust me." 3 words that had been the foundation of our entire relationship. I had always trusted him. I trusted his artistic eye, his emotional intelligence, his love for me. My exhaustion was a heavy cloak, and his confidence was a warm, inviting fire. I wanted to believe him. I wanted him to be right. I wanted him to have his moment, to be the hero, to contribute in a way that felt as monumental as my bonus. Against every cautious instinct in my body, I looked into his earnest, pleading eyes, and I relented. I gave him the one thing he asked for: my trust. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, Mark. Let's do it." His face broke into a radiant smile. He kissed me, a deep, passionate kiss that tasted of coffee and victory. "You won't regret this," he promised. "This is the beginning of everything."
He was right about that.
It was the beginning of everything. The beginning of the end. The next day, I checked our joint account online, just to see the beautiful, reassuring number sitting there one more time before Mark made the transfer. But it was already gone.
Not some of it.
All of it. A 5-figure sum vanished. I stared at the screen, the number 0 glaring back at me like a malevolent eye. A single transaction, a wire transfer to an account I didn't recognize. The description simply read, investment. My blood ran cold. He hadn't just invested a portion. He'd taken everything. I called him immediately, my heart hammering against my ribs. He answered on the second ring, his voice breezy and cheerful. Hey, babe, what's up? The money, Mark, I said, my voice tight. It's all gone. You took all of it. There was a brief pause.
Yeah.
I had to. It was the minimum buy-in. I told you it was a big opportunity. Go big or go home, right? He laughed, a sound that suddenly grated on my ears like scraping metal. You should have told me, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You should have told me you were taking everything. I didn't want to worry you, he said smoothly. It's handled. Our future is secured, Clara. I promise. Now I've got to run. I'm heading into a meeting. I'll see you tonight. Love you. He hung up before I could say another word. I stood in the middle of our living room, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. The sun streamed through the window, but the apartment felt dark and cold. The blueprints for my life, so carefully drawn, so meticulously planned, had just been set on fire. And the man holding the match was my husband. The architect of my future had just demolished its foundation, and I had a sickening feeling he'd done it on purpose. The days that followed were thick with a cloying, silent tension. On the surface, nothing had changed. Mark was still charming, still affectionate. He'd kiss me goodbye in the morning and ask about my day when I got home. But underneath, a chasm was opening between us, a silent, terrifying abyss. When I asked about the investment, his answers were always vague, wrapped in a cloak of cheerful dismissal. It's a long-term thing, babe. We just have to be patient. Tom says everything is looking great. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about the details. I've got it covered. His reassurances, once a comfort, now felt like a pat on the head to a child. He was deliberately shutting me out. The woman who had earned every single penny of that money, was being told not to worry my pretty little head about it. The condescension was a low, simmering heat under my skin. I tried to press for specifics. The name of the startup. A copy of the investment agreement. Anything. But he would just smile, a tight, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes, and change the subject. Let's not talk about boring money stuff. Let's talk about the house. Did you see that place on Elm Street? Maybe we should consider it. He was dangling our shared dream in front of me like a carrot, a distraction from the fact that he had stolen the horse. His phone, once left carelessly on the coffee table, was now perpetually in his pocket or face down on his desk. It would buzz with texts at all hours, and he would angle his body away from me to read them, a small, secret smile playing on his lips. When I asked who it was, the answer was always the same. Just Tom with an update, work stuff, a client with a stupid question. His world was becoming opaque, a fortress I was no longer allowed to enter. He started staying out late. Networking events, he'd say. Client dinners, he'd come home smelling of a perfume that wasn't mine and a brand of expensive whiskey he claimed to hate. He looked tired, but also energized, wired with a secret current that had nothing to do with me. The shared intimacy of our bed became a desolate landscape. He would roll over with his back to me, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional one. I would lie awake for hours in the dark, staring at the silhouette of the man I married, a stranger sleeping beside me, and listen to the sound of my own heart breaking. The small clues started to accumulate, like breadcrumbs leading to a place I didn't want to go. A receipt from a high-end pet boutique fell out of his jacket pocket one evening. The total was obscene. When I asked him about it, he barely glanced at it.
Oh, that.
I went with a colleague to help her pick out a birthday gift for her sister's dog. Ridiculous, I know, he laughed it off, but his eyes darted away from mine for just a second too long. Then there was the credit card statement. A charge for two at La Lune, a romantic, candlelit restaurant on the other side of town. A place I'd always wanted to go. That was a client meeting, he explained, his voice smooth as silk. Had to woo them. You know how it is, I didn't know. I also knew that you don't woo a corporate client at a place famous for its lover's dessert special. Each lie was a small paper cut, insignificant on its own, but together, they were leaving me raw and bleeding. The trust one had so foolishly given him was eroding, grain by grain. I was living with a ghost, a hollowed-out version of the man I loved, and the silence in our apartment was growing louder every day. The dream of our house, of Sunny, of our future, was fading into a cruel mirage. I was an architect living in a house of cards, and I could feel the whole structure beginning to tremble. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that a storm was coming. I just didn't know how much it would destroy when it finally hit. The tipping point wasn't a grand explosion, but a quiet, mundane discovery. I was looking for a warranty for a coffee machine and was rummaging through the important documents drawer in Mark's desk, a place I hadn't looked in for years. Tucked away at the back, under a stack of old tax returns, was a small, folded piece of paper. It was a carbon copy of a rental application. My breath caught in my throat. The applicant's name was Mark Peterson, my husband. But the address was for a luxury apartment building downtown, a place called the Sterling, an address I had never seen before. My hands were shaking as I unfolded it. The move-in date was 2 weeks after my bonus had been deposited. The monthly rent was astronomical, an amount that made my stomach churn. And then I saw it. At the bottom of the form, in the space for co-applicants or other occupants, a single name was scrawled in unfamiliar, loopy handwriting, Jessica. Jessica. The name was a key, unlocking 100 tiny, dark rooms in my mind. The secret smiles at his phone. The late nights. The scent of strange perfume. The pet store. The restaurant for two. It wasn't an investment. It was a whole other life. He hadn't just gambled our future away on a risky stock. He had cashed it in, liquidated our shared dream, and used the funds to build a new one with someone else. He had taken the bricks I had painstakingly made and built a monument to his betrayal. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. For a moment, the room tilted, the floor seeming to fall away beneath me. I collapsed into his desk chair, the flimsy piece of paper clutched in my hand like a death sentence. The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest that made it impossible to breathe. It was a tidal wave of pain so immense, so all-consuming, that I thought it might actually kill me. I saw his face in my mind, his sparkling eyes as he toasted to me, the architect of our future. The hypocrisy was so profound, so monstrous. It was almost absurd. I sat there for an hour, maybe more, in the silent apartment, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life, the photos on the wall, the silly souvenirs from our trips, the home we had built together. It was all a lie. A beautifully constructed, meticulously maintained lie. The grief churned, and then, slowly, something else began to crystallize in its place. It was cold and hard and sharp. It was rage. A pure, undiluted fury that burned away the tears before they could even form. He hadn't just cheated on me. People cheat. It's a sad, common, human failing. This was different. This was a heist. He had watched me work myself to the bone for 2 years. He had rubbed my shoulders and whispered encouragement while I sacrificed my health and my sleep. He had celebrated my success, all the while planning to steal it. He had used my love, my trust, and my labor as his personal piggy bank to fund his sordid little affair. He didn't just break my heart. He disrespected my work, my ambition, my very essence. He had tried to make me small, to reduce my monumental achievement to a simple funding source for his new girlfriend's lifestyle. In that moment, sitting in his chair, holding the proof of his deception, I made a decision. I was not going to cry. I was not going to scream. I was not going to crumble. I was an architect. I build things. And if he could demolish the life we had, then I would build something new from the rubble. I would not be a victim in his story. I would be the architect of his downfall. The first call I made was not to Mark or to a divorce lawyer. It was to a private investigator. I found the best one in the city, a woman with a reputation for being discreet and ruthlessly efficient. I met her in a sterile coffee shop far from my neighborhood, my voice low and steady as I laid out the facts. I used the last of my personal savings, the small emergency fund I had kept separate from our joint accounts, to pay her retainer. It felt like the first real investment I had made in months. An investment in the truth. Her name was Evelyn, and she had cold, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She didn't offer sympathy or platitudes. She just listened, took notes, and told me she would have something for me within a week. That week was the longest of my life. I lived in a state of suspended animation, going through the motions of my life with a chilling sense of detachment. I went to work. I smiled at my colleagues. I came home and made dinner for the man who was systematically destroying me. I played the part of the loving, unsuspecting wife. It was the hardest performance I've ever given. Every smile felt like a crack in a mask, every casual conversation a tightrope walk over a pit of rage. He was oblivious, cocooned in his arrogance and his lies, never once suspecting that the ground beneath his feet was about to give way. Evelyn called exactly 1 week later. "I have the file," was all she said. We met at the same coffee shop. She slid a thick manila envelope across the table. It landed with a soft, heavy thud, the sound of judgment. My hands were surprisingly steady as I opened it. Inside were photographs.
Dozens of them.
Mark and a young woman with long, blonde hair and a dazzlingly white smile. Jessica. They were walking hand in hand out of the Sterling. They were kissing in the park, a happy, clumsy golden retriever puppy nipping at their feet. Sonny. He had even stolen the name of our dream dog. They were sitting at an outdoor cafe, laughing, his arm draped possessively around her. They were at our coffee shop, the one where we had our first date, sitting in our booth. Each photograph was a precise, surgical strike to my heart. But the rage was a shield. I looked at them not as a betrayed wife, but as a prosecutor examining evidence. Evelyn had included documents as well. Bank statements from a new account Mark had opened, showing the direct wire transfer from our joint account. Copies of receipts. A $60,000 transfer for a down payment on a luxury car, a gift for her. Furniture deliveries. Vet bills for the puppy. He had been hemorrhaging my bonus, my hard work, my future, on this elaborate fantasy life. I closed the envelope, my mind whirring. The pain was still there, a deep, throbbing ache, but it was now overlaid with a layer of icy clarity. He had left a trail of paper and pixels. And I, the meticulous planner, the architect who lived by details, was going to follow it to its inevitable conclusion. "Is this everything you need?" Evelyn asked, her voice neutral. I looked up from the envelope, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of something other than pain or anger. It was power. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. It's a perfect blueprint. He had designed his own prison, and I had just been handed the schematics. The time for grief was over.
It was time to start building.
The fury carried me through the next few days. It was a clean, cold engine, humming with purpose. I took the manila envelope to the most feared divorce attorney in the city, a woman named Ms. Davenport who had a reputation for filleting philandering husbands and leaving them with nothing but their tailored suits. She was expensive, but I knew I couldn't afford anything less. I was no longer fighting for a house. I was fighting for my dignity, for the years of my life I had poured into a fraudulent enterprise. I sat in her plush, intimidating office, the city's skyline gleaming behind her, and laid out the evidence. The photos, the bank statements, the rental application. I told her everything, my voice never wavering. She listened intently, her face impassive, her steepled fingers resting on her chin. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, studying the documents. He's arrogant, she finally said, her voice a low, sharp blade. And arrogance makes men sloppy. She tapped the rental application. He put the lease for this apartment entirely in his own name. He likely did it to impress her, to make himself seem like the sole provider. The big man. But he paid for it with our money, I said. My money. Precisely. The funds came directly from a marital account, established during the marriage, into which your employment income, a marital asset, was deposited. The apartment, its contents, even the dog, were all acquired during the marriage with marital funds. They are, legally speaking, marital property, regardless of whose name is on the lease. A sliver of hope cut through the anger. So, I have a claim to it. You have more than a claim, Ms. Davenport said, a thin, dangerous smile touching her lips. You have leverage, but it's not as simple as just taking it. He'll fight it. He'll claim the money was a gift, or that your bonus was separate property, which it is not. It will get messy. It will be a long, drawn-out battle in court. Her words deflated me. The thought of months, maybe years, of legal warfare, of seeing his face across a courtroom, of having our life dissected by strangers, it was exhausting to even contemplate. The rage that had been fueling me began to flicker. Doubt crept in. Maybe it would be easier to just walk away. To let him have his stolen life, his new girl, his puppy. To just sign the papers, take whatever was left, and start over from scratch. The fight suddenly seemed too big, too draining. That night, I went home to the apartment that no longer felt like mine. Mark was there, humming in the kitchen as he made pasta. He smiled when he saw me, a casual, easy smile that made my stomach turn. Hey you. Bad day. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, the lie catching in my throat. Well, I'm making your favorite, he said, gesturing to the stove with a wooden spoon. Carbonara. Should cheer you up. The casual domesticity of it all was a physical blow. He was standing here, making my favorite meal in our home, while just a few miles away, he had a whole other home, a whole other life, built on the ashes of my dreams. The sheer audacity of it, the depth of his deception, was staggering. I felt a wave of despair so profound it buckled my knees. I mumbled something about needing to lie down and escaped to our bedroom. I closed the door and slid down against it, burying my face in my hands. The fight was gone. All I felt was a hollow, echoing emptiness. He had already won. He had taken everything that mattered, my trust, my love, my future, and I was just a ghost haunting the ruins. I looked around the room, at the life we had built. It was all a set, a stage for a play in which I was the unwitting fool. My eyes landed on my drafting table in the corner, a relic from before my big project, when I still had time for my own creative work. On it, pinned to the corkboard, were the blueprints for the Victorian house. Someday. I walked over to it and stared at the intricate lines, the carefully measured rooms, the notes in the margins about sunlight and flow. I had poured so much of myself into that design, so much hope, and he had taken a sledgehammer to it. I reached up to unpin it, to tear it into 1,000 pieces, to destroy the last remnant of the lie. But as my fingers touched the crisp paper, something shifted. A different kind of anger began to smolder in the pit of my stomach. Not the hot, reactive rage of before, but a deep, foundational fury. This was mine. The dream was mine. The work was mine. The money was mine. He didn't get to erase it. He didn't get to win. I was an architect. I don't abandon a project when the foundation cracks. I reassess. I reinforce. I rebuild it stronger. I left the blueprint pinned to the wall. A reminder not of what I had lost, but of what I was fighting for. Not the house itself, not anymore. But for the woman who had dared to design it. I would not let him demolish her. I would not let him turn her into a ruin. The next morning, I walked back into Ms. Davenport's office with a new resolve. I'm not walking away, I said before I even sat down. I want to fight. And I don't just want to fight. I want to win. She nodded slowly, a look of respect in her eyes. Good. Then let's get to work. We need to find a weakness in his position. something we can exploit to gain an advantage before this ever gets to a courtroom. We spent the next week combing through every financial document I could get my hands on. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications. A decade of our shared financial life. It was a painful, tedious process, a forensic accounting of my own betrayal. And then I found it. Tucked into a folder of old travel documents was a durable power of attorney. I had signed it 5 years ago, before a 3-month work trip to Japan. It gave Mark broad powers to manage my finances, to sign documents on my behalf, to act as me in all financial matters, in the event I was unreachable. It was a standard document, a sign of the complete and utter trust one had placed in him. And, crucially, we had never revoked it. It was still valid. On its own, it didn't seem like much. But then Ms. Davenport, with her sharp, predatory instincts, cross-referenced it with the paperwork for the Sterling apartment. Mark had been so arrogant, so eager to set up his new life, that he'd gotten sloppy. He had used a joint credit card, a card in both our names, to pay the non-refundable application fee and the credit check fee. A small, insignificant charge, but a critical link. "This is it," Ms. Davenport said, her voice electric with discovery. "This is our leverage." I didn't understand.
How?
He used a joint financial instrument, for which you are equally liable, to initiate the lease agreement. The lease itself is solely in his name, making it his legal obligation. But he funded the entire enterprise, the deposit, the rent, the furniture, everything with marital assets from the joint account, which the power of attorney gave him access to. He has entangled you financially in his infidelity. He has used your legal authority, granted to him in trust, to secure a liability in his name, paid for with your money. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "We're not going to file for divorce." "Not yet." That's what he'd expect. "We're going to file for an emergency ex parte order. We will petition a judge, without the other party present, for temporary exclusive possession of a marital asset. We will argue that he has misappropriated marital funds in a way that is financially injurious to you. We'll argue that this apartment, while leased in his name, is fundamentally your property, as it was acquired almost entirely with your specific, traceable income. We'll argue that he is cohabitating with another person in this property, dissipating marital assets on a non-spouse, and that to protect the asset from further dissipation, the court must grant you immediate, sole control of it." It was audacious. It was brilliant. It was a legal sneak attack of breathtaking elegance. "Will it work?" I whispered, my heart pounding. Judges don't like it when one spouse uses a position of trust, like a power of attorney, to financially deceive the other. It's not just infidelity. It's a breach of fiduciary duty. It's a clean, compelling argument. It's not guaranteed, but it's our best shot. She drafted the motion that afternoon. It was a masterpiece of legal prose, a cold, clinical evisceration of Mark's actions. It laid out the timeline, the flow of money, the breach of trust. It painted a picture not of a scorned wife, but of a financial partner defrauded by a con artist. 2 days later, we stood before a judge in a quiet, empty courtroom. Ms. Davenport presented our case. The judge, a stern-faced woman with tired eyes, read the motion, her expression unreadable. She looked at the bank statements. She looked at the power of attorney. She looked at the photos of Mark and Jessica and the puppy. She looked at me, standing there, my hands clenched at my sides. She was silent for a full minute. Then she picked up her pen, signed the order, and stamped it with a heavy, final-sounding thud. "Motion granted," she said. "Temporary exclusive possession is awarded to the petitioner, effective immediately. The respondent is to be removed from the premises." I walked out of the courthouse holding the papers, the ink still fresh. It wasn't a divorce decree. It wasn't a final victory. But it was a key. It was control. It was the first brick I would lay in the foundation of my new life. That afternoon, I went to a locksmith with a copy of the lease agreement and the court order. I had a key made for apartment 7B. And then I went to the Sterling. I was no longer a victim. I was the landlord. And rent was due. I stand outside the door, the court order in one hand, the new key in the other. My heart is a steady, rhythmic drum against my ribs. It's not the frantic, anxious beat of a woman about to confront her cheating husband. It's the calm, measured rhythm of a demolition expert about to press the plunger. I've spent my life designing structures meant to last for centuries. Now, I'm about to execute a controlled demolition of a life that lasted a decade. And I feel nothing but a profound, chilling sense of purpose. I turn the key. The lock clicks open with a satisfying finality. I push the door inward. The scene inside is a perfect, sickening diorama of the life he stole from me. The apartment is bright and airy, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The furniture is sleek and modern, expensive and impersonal, the kind of stuff you buy all at once from a catalog. On a plush white rug in the center of the room, a fluffy, golden retriever puppy is wrestling with a squeaky toy. Sonny. He looks up as the door opens, his head cocked, his tail giving a tentative wag. On the gray sectional sofa, she's curled up, laughing as she watches the dog. Jessica. She's younger than I expected, with the easy, unlined beauty of someone who has never had to work for anything. She's wearing an oversized cashmere sweater that I recognize as one of Mark's. And Mark is standing by the kitchen island, a bottle of champagne in one hand, two flutes in the other. He's beaming, the very picture of the proud, successful man providing for his woman. He turns as he hears the door, his smile faltering as he sees me. For a moment, nobody moves. The puppy stops squeaking its toy. The city noise outside seems to fade away. The entire building holds its breath. We are three figures frozen in a tableau of betrayal. Mark is the first to recover. Confusion wars with panic on his face. Clara, he stammers, his voice a hoarse whisper. What are you doing here? How did you get in? I ignore him. My eyes are on her. She's pushed herself up, clutching a cushion to her chest like a shield. Her big, blue eyes are wide with confusion. She looks from Mark to me, then back again. The dawning horror is just beginning to register on her face. I give her a small, tight smile. I let my gaze drift down to the puppy, who has trotted over to sniff my shoes. I reach down and scratch him behind the ears. He leans into my touch, his tail thumping against my leg. Cute dog, I say, my voice even and calm. What's his name? The question hangs in the air. Jessica looks at Mark, her eyes pleading for an explanation, for him to fix this. He just stands there, paralyzed, the champagne bottle held limply in his hand. His name is Sonny, she finally whispers, her voice barely audible. Sonny. I repeat, the name like ash in my mouth. I straighten up, my gaze locking with hers.
I'm Clara.
Mark's wife. I let the last word hang in the air, a poison dart. I see the impact as her face drains of all color. And this, I say, my voice ringing with a clarity and strength I didn't know I possessed, is my apartment. And my puppy. I raise the hand holding the court order. The papers rustle, the only sound in the dead silent room. Mark finally snaps out of his stupor. What the hell are you talking about? Clara, you're crazy. You're trespassing. He takes a step toward me, his face twisting into an ugly mask of anger.
No, Mark.
You're confused, I say, my voice dropping, becoming as cold and hard as the steel beams in the buildings I design. This apartment, the one you leased in your name, was paid for with marital funds. Specifically, with the bonus I earned after 2 years of working 80-hour weeks. The furniture you're standing next to? Paid for with my bonus. The $1,000 sweater your girlfriend is wearing? My bonus. And this beautiful puppy? His vet bills, his food, his overpriced toys, all courtesy of my bonus. I take a step into the room, letting the door swing shut behind me. You see, you made a critical error in your design. You built this little fantasy on my foundation. And according to the state of New York and the judge who signed this order this morning, any asset acquired with marital funds is a marital asset. I hold up the papers for him to see. This is an emergency court order. It grants me temporary exclusive possession of this apartment and all of its contents, pending our divorce proceedings. Which, by the way, Ms. Davenport will be filing first thing Monday morning. I turn my attention back to Jessica, who looks like she's about to be sick. So, as the current legal tenant of this residence, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. You have 5 minutes to gather your personal belongings, and by personal, I mean things you purchased with your own money, and get out. The dam of Mark's composure finally breaks. You can't do this, he roars, his voice cracking with disbelief and rage. This is my apartment. My life. You're trying to ruin me. He lunges toward me, his hands reaching for the papers, his face contorted in a desperate fury. No, Mark, I say, taking a calm step back, holding the order out of his reach. You already ruined you. I'm just here to settle the accounts. He is a cornered animal. All his charm, his smooth excuses, his carefully constructed lies, they've all been stripped away. All that's left is a raw, pathetic desperation. He looks from me to Jessica, who is now sobbing quietly on the couch, then back to me, his eyes wild. He sees his perfect, stolen world crumbling around him, and he can't comprehend it. He, the master manipulator, has been completely outmaneuvered. He opens his mouth to scream at me again, to say God knows what, but the sound that comes out is a choked, wet gasp. His hand, which had been reaching for the papers, flies to his chest, clutching at his shirt. His face, which had been red with rage, drains to a terrifying, pasty white. His eyes widen, not with anger anymore, but with a primal, animal fear. Mark, I say, the single word hanging in the air, detached and strange. He stumbles backward, his legs seeming to give way. He collides with the kitchen island, sending the champagne flutes crashing to the floor in a shower of crystal. He gasps for air, his breath coming in ragged, shallow pants. He slides down the side of the island, his body folding in on itself, until he's a heap on the expensive hardwood floor. Jessica screams, a high, piercing sound that finally breaks the spell. She scrambles off the couch and rushes to his side. Mark, what's happening? Somebody help. I just stand there, by the door, the court order still in my hand. I watch the man who shattered my life, the architect of my pain, lying on the floor of the monument he built to his own betrayal, gasping for breath. The irony is so thick, so potent, it's almost poetic. He built his life on a lie, a foundation of pure stress and deception, and at the first tremor of truth, the entire structure came crashing down, taking him with it. He tried to give me a heart attack with his betrayal, and in the end, it was his own heart that gave out. He had pointed the gun at me for months, but when he finally pulled the trigger, he was the only one who fell. The paramedics are efficient, their movements practiced and impersonal. They work around Mark's prone form with a calm urgency, shouting medical jargon that I don't understand. Jessica is a hysterical mess, trying to answer their questions through hiccuping sobs, her hands fluttering uselessly. I remain by the door, an observer, a ghost at the scene of the crime. I feel strangely, unnervingly calm. The rage has receded, replaced by a vast, quiet emptiness. This wasn't part of the plan. My blueprint didn't include this. They load him onto a gurney. As they wheel him past me, his eyes flutter open for a second and meet mine. There's no anger in them now, just confusion and a terrifying, pleading vulnerability. It's the first honest look he's given me in months. Then his eyes roll back, and he's gone. Out the door and down the hall, the rhythmic squeak of the gurney wheels fading away. Jessica starts to follow them, then stops and turns to me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. "This is your fault," she spits, her voice trembling with a mixture of grief and fury. "You did this to him." I look at this young woman, this girl who is a willing participant in the demolition of my life, and I feel nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even satisfaction. Just a profound sense of weariness. "No," I say, my voice flat. "He did this to himself. You should probably go. He might need you to sign some papers at the hospital." I watch her hesitate, then turn and run down the hall after the gurney, leaving me alone in the silent, sun-drenched apartment. Alone, except for the dog. Sonny has been hiding under the coffee table through the whole ordeal, and now he creeps out, whining softly. He comes over and nudges my hand with his wet nose, his big brown eyes full of a simple, uncomplicated concern. I sink to the floor, my back against the closed door, and the dog climbs into my lap, licking the tears I didn't even realize were falling. I wrap my arms around his warm, wriggling body and bury my face in his soft fur. It smells like puppy shampoo and Mark's cologne. I am sitting on the floor of my new, empty, stolen apartment, hugging my new, sad, stolen dog, and I am utterly, completely alone. The victory feels hollow, the silence deafening. This is what's left. Rubble. Mark survived. A severe panic attack, the doctors called it, brought on by extreme stress. Not a heart attack, but a warning shot. A preview. His body's final, desperate alarm bell. He spent 2 days in the hospital under observation. I never visited. The fight went out of him after that. When Ms. Davenport served him with divorce papers in his hospital bed, he signed them without a word. His arrogance had been built on a foundation of successful deception, and once that was exposed, the whole edifice collapsed. He was just a man, a weak and broken man who had overplayed his hand and lost everything. Jessica disappeared. The minute the money was gone and the reality of a lengthy, messy divorce set in, so did she. I imagine the prospect of caring for a broke, convalescing man was not part of her fantasy. The divorce was swift and brutal. With the evidence of financial misappropriation so blatant, the judge awarded me everything. The full remaining balance of my bonus, the majority of our shared assets, and, of course, permanent legal possession of apartment 7B and all its contents. The first thing I did was sell the lease back to the building management for a tidy profit. I sold the cold, modern furniture online, piece by piece, exorcising their ghosts from my life. I kept only 2 things, the court order, which I framed and hung in my new office, and the dog. For the first few weeks, Sonny was a painful reminder. Every time he looked at me with those soulful eyes, I saw Mark's betrayal. I saw Jessica's laugh. I saw the life that was built to mock me. I almost gave him away a dozen times. But he was persistent. He would nudge my hand when I was staring blankly at a wall. He would drop his squeaky toy at my feet when the silence in my new, smaller apartment became too loud. He would curl up at the foot of my bed at night, a warm, breathing presence in the dark. He had no part in the betrayal. He was just a casualty of it, same as me. Slowly, painstakingly, he burrowed his way into the hollow space in my chest. He became my companion, my shadow, my reason to get out of bed on the days when the grief was a lead blanket. We healed together. I never bought the Victorian house. The dream of it was tainted, tied to a future that had been a lie. Instead, I found a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quieter part of the city, with a big park nearby for Sonny. It's all mine. The lease is in my name. Every piece of furniture was chosen by me, paid for with money I earned. It's smaller than the life I had planned, but it's real. It's built on a foundation of truth. I left my corporate firm. The massive projects and the soul-crushing hours no longer held any appeal. I started my own small, independent practice out of my 2nd bedroom. I specialize in renovations, in taking old, broken things and finding the beauty in their bones, in giving them a new life. It's quiet work. It's honest work. It's healing work. Sometimes, late at night, I'll pull out the old blueprints for the Victorian. I look at the lines and the measurements, the ghost of a dream. I'm not that woman anymore, the one who needed a grand house to feel secure, the one who trusted so blindly. I'm different now.
I'm stronger.
I have scars, but scars are just proof that you survived. Mark tried to demolish me, but he failed. He didn't understand. An architect knows that sometimes the most beautiful structures are the ones that are rebuilt from the ruins. Tonight, the city lights are glittering outside my window. Sonny is asleep on the rug at my feet, his paws twitching as he dreams of chasing squirrels. On my drafting table, there's a new set of blueprints. It's a small project, a cabin in the woods, just one bedroom, a big porch for me and a dog to sit on. It's a design for a future that is entirely, unequivocally my own. And for the first time in a very long time, the foundation feels solid. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to tear down your own life to rebuild it stronger, I'd love to hear your version. The details might be different, but the feeling is universal, isn't it? Thanks for being here with me. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.